Good evening. You're either watching or listening to Redwood Wonk. My name is Eric Kirk. I'm with David Frank. We are talking national political news of the day and, of course, filling up all of the news. And we could easily take hours and hours and write books and books on this, but it is the tragic war that has been renewed. I don't call it a new war. It's a war that's been going on. You could argue at least since 1967, if not back before 1948, before the state of Israel was founded. We don't want to get too much into the details of the history and what this is about and where it's going. We are going to focus on the topic of our show, which is how it will impact United States politics. And that is, it's actually the dynamics are so convoluted. Even in that, it's hard to discuss. But immediately there's partisan politics, and then there's intra-party politics that are really complex and also on their way tragic. Of course, there's expected to be the performative. I condemn Hamas and support Israel, unless you're on the left, in which case you don't condemn the oppressed. People who are of an oppressed mindset. You'll hear people say Gaza is a big open air prison of 2 million people. What do you expect? Kind of a thing that's seen as being kind of disrespectful to the victims, and most of the victims of this war are non-military, either IDF or Hamas militants. I believe we're getting close to 2,000 dead, about 1,000 on each side at this point. It's another typical situation where there was an attack. This was probably the most brutal attack since at least the 1973 war, if not going to the 1967 war, in terms of Israeli deaths, anyways. And the responding bombing it's horrible. Kids are dying, and there's just nothing. It's just you get a helpless feeling when you're talking about it. So what happens in American politics? Well, certain things have to be said certain ways. Everybody is carefully scripted, some more than others. Of course, a couple of members of the squad are in trouble for maybe more what they didn't say than what they did say. They condemn the Israeli invasion, or they chalk it up to well, maybe we can get some of the exact quotes in there, but they are being condemned by their fellow Democrats for it. McCarthy is trying to make politics of it. He wants to use this as a way to get back into being Speaker by saying that we need to be a functional Congress in order to address this. Josh Hawley is calling for a complete reallocation of all funds that were going to Ukraine to Israel, and of course, Iran has come in. Nikki Haley and Senator Graham have attacked Biden for sending money to Iran. A lot of people don't realize that's actually Iranian money that's been given back over the years. That's a whole complex story of itself. It's not like we're just giving them money. And while the whole while, the Israeli military is saying we don't know if there's a connection to Iran. We haven't found one yet. It's just I don't even know where to start, but it's completely upended American politics. We don't know what its implication is going to be for funding for Ukraine or anything else. We don't know what its implication is going to be for the intra-party politics, as well as the partisan politics. Number of people are just staying away from commenting on anything other than to say, this is horrible. I feel bad about it. And that's probably, maybe arguably the smartest thing to do, except that when certain people are saying that and they're not condemning one side or both or the other, that is seen as a political, whether or not it's a mistake for them, other people feel compelled to condemn them for what they are and aren't saying. And this is very intricate politics. And Dave, where would you like to start?
Well, thanks for that great setup as usual. I think the best place to start is that just I know we talked about not getting into history very much, but the idea of Hamas itself was put in place as a way to keep the PLO, the secular leadership of Palestine, from easily having a strong presence south of Israel and
Hmm.
east of Israel. So at first it got lots of support as an entity, but then it sort of got out of hand, and soon thereafter, they ended up sort of unilaterally seizing control of Gaza, and there's been this split. So it's really important for people to know that Palestine is really split between the
Yeah.
West Bank, which is the offshoot of the PLO, the original Palestinian Liberalization Organization
Now officially referred to as the Palestinian Authority, but has no
Authority.
influence in Gaza.
In Gaza, yeah. So that's technically now the state of Palestine that's not recognized by all of the United Nations as a state, and that's really where we are. Is that some folks wanted to, the West Bank folks wanted to sort of go through the United Nations and the normal traditional diplomatic channels, and the Gaza people under Hamas believed that that wasn't getting them there, and they're Islamist and a little bit more, they're a known listed terrorist group. So a small part of the leadership of the Palestinian people are who we're talking about. So I think that
Hmm.
that's a good place to start. And then from there, in the United States, it's really important for most political leaders to support Israel unconditionally. And when things like this happen, like you said, there's uh, a strong tendency to be very articulate about almost bending over backwards to a certain extent to show the support appropriately. Widespread public show of support amongst U.S. government members, and it ranges from like unconditional support for an ally under attack to calls for escalation to a regional conflict against Hezbollah in the north and Lebanon, and Iran as the ultimate funder and power broker behind these two sort of proxy groups that are against, the state of Israel, and to a certain extent against the United States hegemony. So that's the big picture. I want to say, President Biden, he forcefully denounced Hamas's attack as
Hmm.
our representative, our highest elected official. He said it was pure, unadulterated evil. That's a quote, pledging the United States, quote, has Israel's back. And he was on calls with Benjamin Netanyahu, saying that Israel, with all its anger and frustration, still had to, quote, operate by the rules of war. So that's kind of the the tripwire that many political players in Washington and beyond find themselves to thread that needle of saying we have unconditional support for our ally, but also that our ally ought to be operating by the rules of war, when in fact historically they don't. Neither side does, of course, but that's because one side is a listed terrorist organization and another is a powerful nuclear state that doesn't admit it has nuclear weapons. So there's this asymmetry that has been nagging at the global history for a long time, at least since, like you said, 67 in the Six-Day War. But that's when all the Arab states got together and tried to fight Israel, but Israel defended itself. Um, Egypt took
Sure.
over control of that southern border there. So this is complicated, but here the deal is that some people still want to be critical of Israel, and in this climate, it appears to be too soon. Um,
Yeah.
you can be critical of them. Uh,
Partly because this attack is different from before.
yes.
Hamas deliberately attacked a concert, in fact, one of the holiday concerts, and just massacred everybody that they saw there. So it's just, again, it's about the timing
Yeah.
of things. Yeah.
And like you said, in the brutality, and it's clear through the specificity of the actions that they are, barbaric and outside the rules of engagement. It truly is terrorism, and I think hard stop. Like that's the truth. But what's happening is in the political climate that we live in, whether it's calls against Elon Musk and X for supporting Hamas by publishing the events of the day, which he has to account for that with the European Union. That's a whole nother conversation. All social media now has to account for how they're handling this. It's a cutting edge issue. But so do political leaders. Like, for example, Rashida Tlaib, who's somebody who Democrat from
Right.
Michigan. She's somebody who has gone out before and supported the Palestinian people, their situation, like you talked about. You said Gaza is known as an open air prison. All goods and services that cross the border and all people that cross the border are controlled by the militaries of Egypt and Israel. So there are sort of human rights criticisms historic in play, but I think a more nuanced issue here too is that, like, anybody who is not going full force with we support Israel at all costs, that they're getting some criticism. So Rashida Tlaib, not that I necessarily, I'm just using her as an example. She said,
Right.
I do not support the targeting and killing of civilians, whether in Israel or Palestine.
Yeah.
The fact that
Right.
some have suggested otherwise is offensive and rooted in bigoted assumptions about my faith and ethnicity. And it is. It just goes to not to keep talking. I'm sorry here, but it goes to the point where, like, if you have ever said anything good about the Palestinian plight needing attention, like trying to highlight it, like, for example, Human Rights Watch
Yeah.
has published over the years many things, right? Then you might be coming up for criticism now, and that's the climate we find ourselves in.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to give the exact quote that Tlaib said. And she, by the way, is the only Palestinian representative in Congress. I grieve the Palestinian and Israeli lives lost yesterday, today, and every day. I am determined as ever to fight for a just future where everyone can live in peace without fear and with true freedom and equal rights and human dignity. The path to that future must include lifting the blockade, ending the occupation, and dismantling the apartheid system that creates suffocating, dehumanizing conditions that can lead to resistance. Now, it's hard to attack that quote if this wasn't happening. It's a political position you take, you agree or disagree with, but timing is everything. It's just not the time for that. She has today, or as of this morning, acknowledged that Hamas has committed war crimes, and that's good. But again, if you can't say it right, don't say it all, is what some of the other Democrats are saying. Just stay quiet until you can raise those issues, and you can simply say I've had my differences with the Israeli government, but this is not the time for that, and I grieve the loss of life. If you just say something like that and table the agenda, but by not tabling it, she was facing censure in Congress, which doesn't mean a whole lot. People are getting censured a lot these days, but it's they Cori Bush also got in trouble for again equivocating, and Saturday was not the time to equivocate. Maybe we're starting to get to that point, as 1,000 people are dead on both sides. You can start saying, okay, what is this accomplishing? Are you getting to, are you even going to, how many Hamas people are you even killing in those attacks? They've got bunkers, right? Nobody else does. So it's just, but you can raise that. And you can say that now, but Saturday was not the time. Not as videos were going all over of people seeing their kids killed. I think we still have about a dozen Americans missing, for instance. We saw the German woman being, swept into the car, and we've heard of babies being killed, whether or not they were deliberately killed, and whether or not the babies were beheaded. Again, that's an irresponsible thing to be passing around with the information that we have, but it's been passed around, and it harkens back to the first Gulf War, when actually we had the ambassador, Kuwait's ambassador telling stories about babies being ripped out of life support systems. Turned out to be a complete fabrication. So, you got to be real careful here, because with the information that's coming out and what we refer to as the fog of war. And it's just a time where you've got to be really careful. what you say, and you got to maybe put aside an agenda for a few days. And she made the mistake of not doing that. I haven't heard anything about what Omar said. It's on that day she may have stayed quiet for all I know. She is now condemning Israel's military response, but that's all I know about what she said. So again, you've got this performative thing that has to happen in Congress, and you got to say the right thing in precisely the right way. And some Republicans are making some mistakes too, by the way, but we'll get to that. But I just have you respond.
Yeah. I mean, no, I think that's a great segue, honestly, because I think you nailed it when you said saying the right thing at the right time. If you look at and again, I knew we were going to be long-winded with this because it's such a big topic. But just to hit two of the points that you mentioned earlier, one is talk about the potential for drawing Iran into a larger war. You've got people like Senator Lindsey Graham out there saying that the best way to de-escalate is to tell them X, Y, Z, and that was all escalation. It's not de-escalation. So some people are kind of outflanking each other on that dangerous side. But another thing that you said was about the money. I just want folks to know that in terms of like the amount of money that we committed to them over the years, I think it's $150 billion in total aid since 48. Plus, President Obama, 2019 and 2028, he signed an agreement, $38 billion. Plus any additional add-ons as needed. Like last year, we gave them $1 billion worth of Iron Dome equipment, and we probably in the last few days gave them another God knows how much towards that exact same system. But part of the law in the United States says that, and this is important, Israel can draw on that $38 billion before 2028 as much as they need whenever they need it. And that includes the massive stockpiles of weapons that the U.S. military has in Israel already. So people talking about we have to make sure they have what they need when they need it. It's already, the money is not an issue. They already have the credit. They've already got massive amounts of things staged in country, and they have access to those whenever they want. That's already by U.S. law. So when you hear about it from people within U.S. Congress, it's more about grandstanding than it is about the realities of their true strategic needs to respond to this crisis.
We have so much more that we could say on it, but as to the, what it's done in terms of the Saudi Arabian Israeli attempt to normalize and all of that, that's tabled. And there's a lot more that we can say, but we have to stop there. We only have a certain amount of time. We could easily dedicate the whole show to it and still be as inadequate. Again, it's real sad what's happening. People are dying as we're talking, and we'll probably be talking about it in the future, unfortunately.
We need to make sure we're sending a message to people all throughout the world that the House is open and doing the people's business.
I think that there's a problem with leadership in our conference.
I'm excited for him. Can't wait to go vote for Steve Scalise. Absolutely. Long live Speaker Scalise.
Given the district that I represent, I can in good conscience move forward at this time supporting him for Speaker.
We can't afford this dysfunction. The nation can't afford this. The American people can't afford it.
All right, we discussed this last week. The House majority Republicans, the House still does not have a speaker. We are in uncharted territory. The Republicans have a couple of people running. They, of course, have House Member Scalise and Jim Jordan. All the talk about nominating Trump or Nunes or anything went out the window. Matt Gaetz did vote for Trump, which actually kind of pissed Trump off because that meant he only got one vote, and he'd rather not be mentioned at all than get one vote. Matt Gaetz is persona non grata right now for having triggered this whole situation that the Republicans are in. It is, as we both acknowledged last week, it's putting the Republican majority in great danger because we've got Jim Jordan, who is considered part of the hard right, the Freedom Caucus, and the rest. We've seen him in action. We've talked about him a lot on this show. Scalise, in my opinion, isn't all that much better, but he is a little bit saner. And he's got, well, as of the last vote, they have not actually brought a vote to the floor because they don't have enough, and they're split, not exactly down the middle. Scalise has 113 votes, and Jordan has 99. And they can only afford to lose 4 Republican votes in order to have the majority to pass. They're not going to get any help from Democrats unless they ask for it, unless they offer something, but that's out. Partly because of the stranglehold Trump still has on this, that any working with the Democrats, any sense of bipartisanship would be considered weak, and the rest, because you've got armies of people that the Republicans need to be elected who believe that the Democrats are evil incarnate. I mean, they say it right there on Young Turk and Daily Show interviews. They say they're evil, all of them. I don't like any Democrat, not even my cousin, So they say this. Of course, they need 217 votes. And looks like some people sat out the election because 113 and 99 don't total up to 217. So some are just not even voting. It looks like Representative Byron Donalds has thrown his hat in. And of course, over the weekend, as stories were coming out about how the Republican dysfunction might be harmful to Israel, McCarthy was willing to step back in and say, "Hey, I'll do it again just for this," but doesn't seem to be a whole lot of support for him on that. Doesn't seem to be any, actually. I mean, I think he showed himself to be thoroughly ineffective. I think even people who would have supported him before just don't see him as an effective leader. I don't know who could be in this, but he definitely wasn't. So the House is out until noon tomorrow. We're waiting to see what happens, and if the Republicans can pull it together to appoint a speaker to basically run the House so that something can get done, including any appropriations. As you say, I guess they don't need appropriations, but apparently they need something. I'm talking about Israel, of course. And so this is where we're at. The House is recessed. We're waiting, and they are nowhere near the type of consensus that they need to vote. And I'm really actually surprised that Jordan has 99 votes. That's a lot of Republicans voting for a crazy person. I'm sorry, and I'm losing my objectivity a little bit when I talk about certain people, but Jordan is a nutcase. I'm sorry, plain and simple. And if he gets nominated the speaker, there is so much baggage there. Now elected in the famous Duck District, as they called it, part of Ohio's extreme gerrymandering that is being challenged in the courts. Dave.
Yeah, this is a real interesting situation we find ourselves in as a country. Just when there's bipartisan demand for a resolution to come out of the House to condemn Hamas's actions and support an ally, that the timing seems, the pace, the fact that ought to happen shortly, but then we find ourselves without a House of Representatives, a leaderless House. So in theory, I guess that the interim leader could conduct force a vote. I think that's, in theory, there could be some compromise candidate. But the fact that Donald Trump supported Jim Jordan, I think that explains a lot about why there's so much support behind him. Some of the quotes from folks in support of him, like Max Miller from Ohio, "I'm not going to change my vote now or anytime soon." Marjorie Taylor Greene, she would not vote for him because he's fighting cancer, and I'd rather him fight cancer then be the speaker. Thomas Massey, Kentucky, he said Scalise has not secured his vote because he's not articulated a viable plan for avoiding an omnibus spending bill. So they're still saying, okay, well, look, we knew what we had with McCarthy. He was going to railroad through this budget. Who's gonna give us something different? And I think Scalise is trying to play the high ground a little bit because he is notable for his credibility. He is the majority leader. He's a former whip, so he's got leadership experience. And not that it's it's not more than a badge of honor, but he was shot by an anti-Trump extremist gunman at a congressional baseball game. Yeah. And he was the chairman of the influential Republican study group. So he's got sort of this ethos around him of success. The flip side of that, though, is that McCarthy, and this I got from Politico, it's like inside baseball stuff, but McCarthy privately described Scalise as ineffective, checked out, and reluctant to take positions, and he was cut out of all major decision making at the party leadership. So all the good I just said about him being part of the party leadership, McCarthy apparently did not fully appreciate his contributions, and then so that's possibly explaining why he's having a hard time getting support around him currently. So the question is, what are they going to do about it? I think over the weekend there was like a hit campaign against Jim Jordan about his spotty ethical history in his prior professional life, and you can look it up.
Like covering up sexual allegations of sexual abuse in the wrestling team.
Exactly that. Yeah. So that's
why some people refer to him as GYM Jordan. Is a derogatory nickname, but yeah.
Gotcha, like Gym Rat. Gotcha. So there's this sort of, is he even remotely qualified? And I wonder, just based on how he his how he carries himself in the idea of the impeachment hearings and the Hunter Biden thing. It just seems like he's really just a lightning rod for attention and grandstanding. So that's not exhibiting, not that it's my judgment, but I'm seeing and hearing, and it seems to be the case that people don't consider him actual leadership material. And then so there's that piece of it. So the question is, it'll probably end up being Scalise, but where? How is this going to happen? And one last thing here, I think McCarthy put himself back in the arena because his thought was, hey, at least I was the devil that and you knew where you stood with me. And hey, Democrats, if I grovel to you now in the back channels and agree to put funding in place for the things that are your priorities and agree to move that continuing resolution along, can I get some support from that side? And so the question is, why should they do that? And I don't think that there's a really sufficient answer there, which means they're in this really deadlock state. They have to try to thread the needle on getting Scalise enough support. He's got to say the right things to the right people. And I think the coverage is showing that that's what he's working on right now. We're recording this Wednesday evening, West Coast time. They're probably going late into the night trying to figure out if they could get a vote together by Thursday.
I mean, if he wins with Democratic help, that leads to all kinds of implications. It's something that would have happened in the old days. Might have happened, maybe not necessarily, but it's something that could have been put together. But you have to do politics. You got to govern, which means you've got to give something. You want something, you got to give something. And McCarthy would be speaker right now if he was willing to give something. But the politics are so intense right now that giving anything to Democrats is political, third rail in Republican politics. To even be seen as beholden to them. So we've got a problem. Democrats are playing it very interesting. Jeffries, who is the minority leader, who will probably get all of the Democratic votes if some kind of a deal isn't made, has basically said, hey, I hope the GOP can get its act together. He's trying to look like a statesman, right? This is a very subtle politics. You think it's being friendly, but It's not. It's it's very smart politics actually, because they're going to, the Democrats are going to pound Republicans on this, even moderate Republicans, saying you might be a nice guy, but your party is just too functional, and here we were rooting for you, and there was a government shutdown because you couldn't get your act together. We couldn't get the resolutions out about Israel, and when Israel was facing an existential crisis, it's going to be used against them. The Democrats already have a major weapon, and if Jordan gets elected, they'll probably have a lot more. So they know they can't elect Jordan, but you've got these 99 votes, so you've got Trump, basically, I don't even want to say leader of the party, he owns the party right now, saying you got to do that. All he cares about is getting himself elected. So I guess one of the questions is part of the reason they're in this mess is because they had to agree to the one-person motion to vacate that brings it to the floor. And of course, Gates is the one who did that and only got 8 votes, for it. But that was enough, with all the Democrats saying, "Hey, we're not, don't talk to us." And so the question is whether or not the Republicans will or even can get rid of the motion to vacate.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that. It's interesting you mentioned that because they today tried to do that, and they couldn't. There was not a consensus around that. So I think it was maybe Scalise trying to say, "Hey, look, this amateur hour thing with McCarthy, where the leadership capitulates. We can't have that. It's not good for the party. It doesn't work. Let's get rid of that. Let's just agree to get rid of that." And they couldn't. So,
and if this was normal times, that's something that a speaker could go to Democrats for, but this is not normal times.
Exactly. Yeah. And they were behind closed doors today. It was I think both parties did this today too. Both conferences where closed meetings and some internal fighting happening in the Democratic side. It was about Israel, and it actually resulted in a bunch of people storming out of the room, and so there's conflict on both sides today. But in this case, it's about speaker. It's about a sort of a more existential question. Nancy Mace, she, for her part, she said that I can't in good faith support somebody to be the leader of the party who in effect attends white nationalist events.
Yes.
So Scalise had said that he didn't do it on purpose, and once he figured out that he was at a white supremacist event, he denounced it, and it was a long time ago. But it is a long time ago that he also said, "I'm like David Duke without the baggage." He's from David Duke's district in Louisiana. So his district elected a former Klan leader to the state legislature back in 1989.
Yep.
So he might have just been playing to the room, and it might have just been
but it comes back on you.
But it comes back around, right?
Nancy Mace was also one of the eight who voted to oust McCarthy, and she, not completely getting the scarlet letter concept, but she came in with a letter on her chest, a red letter saying, this is the scarlet letter. I think maybe she should read the book before she did what she did, but those 8 are taking a lot of flack right now.
So I heard that was, I didn't make the connection of what the letter represented. Did you connect the dots for us?
Yeah, she's wearing a letter on her chest. Of course, the scarlet letter is a reference to being a pariah, because that is the theme of the original novel. Again, I think she hadn't read it, but and so she's got. It was kind of funny. A letter A, a red one on her blouse, right on her breast, which draws a lot of very interesting attention. She's a very attractive woman, and things are getting lost in the translation here, and it's just making it just made it even more of a circus element. All kinds of articles about that, about her shirt and what she has on her shirt. We're at this point where there is serious dysfunction. Tim Santos has been charged with another charge for fraud, and a group of Republicans are saying, we want to make a motion to get him off the floor. Democrats said, what floor? You don't have a floor.
If you want to get to President Trump, you're going to have to go through me, and you're going to have to go through 75 million Americans just like me. And I'm going to tell you, most of us are card-carrying members of the NRA. If you want to get to President Trump, you're going to have to go through me, and you're going to have to go through 75 million Americans just like me. And I'm going to tell you, most of us are card-carrying members of the NRA. That's not a threat. That's a public service announcement.
All right, we go from the fully national back to the Senate races. We'll probably be discussing individual races as we go along, but one very crucial race for both parties, and well, I guess independents if you're one, is Arizona. And as you know, Kyrsten Sinema, former Green Party member, kind of made some political moves over the years, and she is part of the Sinema Mansion couple that basically prevented a lot of agenda from happening while the Democrats had the power by just refusing to cooperate, and so she is now sort of a pariah in Democratic politics because of what she did. So she left the party. She's running as an independent, and everybody was worried that this would have a negative impact on the Democratic ability to win the race. I have to resist saying Paul. It's Ruben Gallego, who is the Democrat. And as of today, or maybe it was yesterday, Carrie Lake, some people refer to as Scary Carrie, all-out Trump person who ran and failed last time around, claims that the election was rigged against her, immediately got Trump's endorsement. She showed up at the first Republican debate with her phone on, saying she was listening to Trump's interview that was, with Tucker Carlson, making a big point about how this was a useless thing to be at, even though she was there to make that point. But anyway, it's so she's in it. And the problem for the Republicans is that, I think a lot of assumptions was that when Kyrsten Sinema left the party and decided to run as an independent, it was going to draw votes away from Democrats. Well, it probably is, but apparently it's drawing more from the Republicans, and especially if somebody like Carrie Lake is the Republican nominee. Latest poll, all of the polls have had Gallego in front. Plurality, not a majority, but public policy polling it has, and they're a pretty good polling firm. It has a Gallego receiving 41%, Lake receiving 36%, and Sinema down to 15%. I don't think, there's so probably the best chance for the Republicans is if Sinema drops out, because she is collecting a lot of moderate Republicans and maybe some independents who might consider voting for a Republican if it wasn't Carrie Lake.
Yeah, this is an interesting race in part because Arizona is one of those states that are considered the best chance Republicans have to pick up a win, along with West Virginia, Montana, and Ohio. And if they were able to get all four of those, in theory, they could take back a majority in the Senate. So this is really important for Republicans. And it's early in the race. Like you said, there's minimal polling out there. I did see one additional poll besides the PPP poll public policy polling. And in fact, like I said, it is early. But if they took Lake's name out, Carrie Lake, and they put in Masters or Lamb instead, because maybe they're considering, and I'm not sure why, or because they were, involved last time around. It instead of Lake getting 36%, both Masters and Lamb are polling at 31%.
Which
so that's
is interesting.
That's another 5% that could, in theory, probably go to Sinema over Gallego, or get her closer to Gallego. So Gallego's in a pretty good spot according to the current polling. But that new poll, National Research, and I'm not sure how reputable they are, because I saw, and I hate to impugn an agency without knowing better about their methodologies, but it was only 400 people. So the margin of error is 5%, 4.9%. So that's a big one. Plus, it was really pushed out by the Washington Examiner, and Washington Examiner said, we're the first ones to push this out. So it leads me to believe it's somewhat biased in a way, but we'll do more research as we get closer. But they show Gallego and Lake in an even heads up, 44 each. And if it's Gallego, and they show Lake beating Gallego 37-33 if Sinema is in the race in a three-way race, at Sinema with 19. So anyway, that corresponds with a study.
But that is an outlier, because the polls have had Gallego ahead all the way back to last spring.
Yeah, and there's only been 2 polls in October, and there hasn't been anything before this since like July. So I think we're just getting back into the swing of things, and we'll see how it plays out. I think I like Gallego's chances in terms of he's progressive, and he's got the support. Well, I'll say it a different way. You would think he would have the support of the Democratic Party, although to date, because he would be the first Latino, in part because he'd be the first Latino elected Senate in Arizona's history. But in fact, the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee and the Senate Majority PAC, which is the money behind it, last time around they spent $40 million in Arizona, and they have not supported him yet. So I think, generally speaking, they're disinclined to support progressives. So that there's some inside baseball going on in the Democratic Party. They have to see the lay of the land here a little bit better. But I also think it's interesting, what I started to say earlier is that Carrie Lake's people are pushing a paper that shows like an analysis that how hard it would be for Sinema to win re-election. And what they're saying is that she's, as an independent, she would have to get between 10 and 20% of Democrats, between 25 and 35% of Republicans, and between 60 and 70% of independents, where John McCain only got 50% of the independents when he ran back in 2016, which is the highest he ever got amongst independents. So anyway, what they're saying is that if Trump gets the nomination, and Arizona breaks the way it did last time, that Sinema would need over a third of all Trump voters to break off and vote for her personally, splitting the ticket, which is not precedented in party politics. So that shows, granted, again, this is Carrie Lake's numbers, but that Sinema is going to have a really hard time as an independent in a place like Arizona right now. So I think that's part of the reason Carrie Lake's getting ahead of it. And again, anything that you said before about Representative Jordan, I think people would have a really hard time imagining Carrie Lake as a senator. So I could picture the independents doing this. I could picture an independent split, even if you're inclined to support Republicans or Democrats for that matter. I could see people breaking away from Carrie Lake and supporting Sinema. So maybe she will actually run, although she hasn't announced yet.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the poll too. It's Lamb and Blake don't do as well, but they're perceived as rhinos by a lot of the people. So my guess is, and it seems like Sinema picks up votes in those. So my guess is Trumpers will say they'll vote for Sinema. Do it. It looks like about the same level of undecideds. But again, it's just like the question in California. I don't want to get into that race at this point, but as to whether or not Schiff will get votes of a lot of Republicans because he's the most conservative Democrat if he's running against either of his opponents in the final. And but they hate him because he was the he was Trump's one of the biggest ones to go after him. Sinema wasn't. Sinema was kind of seen as a hero in some Republican circles, and so we can see that. So if they're not happy with Mark Lamb or Blake Masters because they are not Trumpy enough, and they didn't back the what was it, the Flying Ninjas or whatever crazy audit
Cyber
thing.
Ninjas.
The Cyber Ninjas, okay, yeah. That's and the like. So again, Republicans have a problem there. There are places where Democrats have some serious problems. We've discussed them, and we'll discuss them again. But at this point, I would say that unless there's some major change in dynamics, Ruben Gallego gets caught having an affair or something like happened in North Carolina a few years back. I don't see it. Or if Lake does something and maybe Mark Lamb or Blake Masters makes a move in the primary, but if they can't draw the Trumper votes, they don't, all of them or good, most of them. I think this is I think the Republicans are going to have a real hard time this time around. They can't even really take advantage of the fact that there are a number of Latinos in rural areas who are more likely to vote for Trump because they are probably going to vote for Gallego, possibly even against Lake, despite Trump's endorsement. This is a real as opportunity for them for pride, and this is a big deal. I mean, we'll be talking about Montana and Ohio and Pennsylvania in future shows, which are runs where Republicans have much better chance. In fact, I would say almost certain chance in a couple of places, possibly, but of taking it. But better chance even in Nevada. But this one, I would, if I was to place any bets, I would say the Democrats have this one.
Yeah, I think just as past as predicate, the fact that Kari Lake was unsuccessful in her bid for governor shows that people had some reservations about supporting her. She was a TV anchor and conservative, outspoken TV anchor, like in her own lane. To be honest, or to be clear about it, but she had the name recognition, and so the Republicans knew who she was, but they just apparently they didn't turn out in sufficient numbers, or they decided that that's not exactly who you want to be governor. So people have a memory and people have an experience with her, which again I think that kind of bodes well for Sinema at least trying to maintain her seat.
Well, but Sinema's in trouble though. She cannot be in third place and expect to win. I'm wondering if she'll even run. The assumption is that she is, but I'm thinking she may just cash in and go get her lobbying position and just stop. She doesn't. During the whole time, unlike Manchin, she was hiding from everybody, the press. She wasn't talking to her own constituents and the rest. So I just wonder if she's even going to do this. But either way, even if she drops out, I think that Gallego is the favorite here. He's smart, articulate, and seems to have a good political sense on him. Hasn't done anything to mess up yet. Eventually, the Democratic PACs will fall in line and give him the money he needs to win this because they can't afford to lose it. Doesn't seem to be any more conservative or centrist Democrat that is even approaching him. He seems to have that popularity. So, again, this is something that the Democrat, obviously it's a must win for the Democrats. They've got to hold on to it to have any chance of holding on to the Senate, which I think the odds are against them holding on to the Senate. Not impossible, But they need an inside straight, and so they need this win too.
Just to kind of support what you said here, I think earlier in this, I mean, I know earlier in this conversation, I mentioned that the National Senate Democratic campaign committee, and also their PAC, they have not yet endorsed Gallego, but he's already getting lots of local endorsements around the state, including from Yolanda Bejarano, who's the chairwoman of the Arizona Democratic Party.
Yeah.
So the state apparatus is actually behind him,
regardless. He's
got
union support backing him. He's doing it. I think that the writing is on the wall there. He's probably the nominee.
Yep.
Eeny, meeny, chili, beany, the spirits are about to speak.
Are they friendly spirits?
Friendly? Just listen.
Well, that brings us to predictions. Dave, what do you have for us?
I'm going to stick with the theme and make a prediction based on one of our topics from this evening. And in this case, it's going to be, I know I said it already last week. I thought it was going to be Steve Scalise, but I think it's worthy to mention it again because he did not get the support he expected today. I think the reason for that was because his colleagues are looking to get more concrete wins in the bank, in their back pocket, out of him, more concessions. So my prediction is that he's going to kind of fall into the same trap McCarthy did, promise a lot of things to a lot of people. He's going to be able to get his ducks in a row, and sort of by default, he's going to end up making it through this mess and become the next speaker, probably before the end of the week, because of all the international pressures on Congress to move forward with the resolutions in support of Israel.
All right. Well, I'm coming back to California. One of my old baseball heroes from the 1970s, Steve Garvey, was part of the great infield of the Los Angeles Dodgers, and he is a Republican, and he has declared that he's running for the now vacant, not vacant, but the Dianne Feinstein's seat for the Senate. This is a crowded field, as we've already discussed. We've got the Lee, Porter, and Schiff Democratic Trinity being the main candidates there. There are now 6 Republicans in the race, however, including a couple of others who are fairly prominent enough that I think that in this jungle primary system that we have, they're going to split the votes. And we are going to have next November a Schiff-Porter race, and one of those few times where both the candidates who survive and go on are Democrats, and we will see who has more power between the mainline Democrats backing Schiff and the progressives who will probably be backing Porter. But that is my prediction, and until next time, stay informed and stay engaged.